So we have a couple of chapters to catch up on, and the reason why I wanted to wait was because 10, 11, and 12 kind of all fit together. So if we're going to kind of figure out the story about the situation with Bathsheba, we really need to look at the background of the history, and so I knew we couldn't get all three of those chapters done. Any initial responses that you have to this section? I heard one or a couple people talk about, my goodness, it's just as bad then as it was, or as it is now. One of the things to remember when we're looking at the scriptures is they are describing with always a purpose or a mindset for it. They're describing what happened in the theological unfolding of kingship and God's choosing the people and all of that. And so when people say, for example, oh, let's have a Bible study on David, my first question is, which chapters? Okay, because we're going to pick out the Goliath story, and we may pick out 2 Samuel 7 on him becoming king. But we're not necessarily going to pick all of them that way unless we're smart enough to realize that a good bit of Bible study is about what's wrong in the human heart. And if we say what's wrong in the human heart, then we can begin to realize that there are a lot of evidences of that here, even among the ones who are to be seen as kind of the bright lights. I don't know if I'll get all of these right, but think of some of the most well-known people. I'm going to pick on men right now. But Adam, Abraham, Moses, David, Peter, and Paul. Probably outside of Jesus, the 6 chief characters. I didn't mention this before, but I've been thinking to mention it. We have more narrative about the life of David than about the life of Jesus. Okay, if you would take the 4 Gospels and put them together, we really have 3 years of Jesus' life, and except for, of course, a couple of early events. But with David, we have a whole long extended narrative. We're going to look today at a son who treats his father like Judas treated Jesus. Okay, and there are a lot of parallels, not predictions, but a lot of parallels. Those who are part of the family who turn on the family for who knows what reason. Never going to be an exact kind of thing, but we're going to see some of that. Anyway, in chapter 10, and one of the problems that I think we have to face is in the story of the Bible, there are a lot of cross connections. And you might be frustrated with me because I say, well, look at this, and this is connected with this, and you remember this back here. Don't be surprised if you don't remember it all. Don't be shocked. Just say, well, each time we go at it, we'll catch a little bit more. This is just to kind of get you going a little bit and have some kind of a framework for what you're doing. This is not the last time I hope you look at this. It just means as you're looking at it in the future, you'll have some frame of reference, because everybody comes to texts reading with certain expectations. They come to church with certain expectations. If my expectation is that the pastor is going to stand on his head and spit quarters, in other words, be a very entertaining person, and the pastor isn't, I'll say, well, I didn't like that church. If I come saying, I want to hear about my salvation every week, and he's standing up there spitting quarters and being entertaining, I might say I didn't get much out of it. And so you can have people who are going to have different expectations of the same thing. Same with the Bible. And so the real question I would try to ask is, what does God himself provide for us? What hints can we get about what he gives us the scriptures for? And not to sugarcoat it or say we only need to look at a few things or find our few favorite passages or favorite Bible stories. It's the real problem with reading from a lectionary. When you have a lectionary and you have 3 years of reading, You may do Matthew, or now we're doing Mark, and some from the Gospel of John and Luke. Well, there are people I've mentioned, I think, who would like to have a fourth year and have a whole separate year for the Gospel of John. And I think they're probably right. But this was from a one-year cycle where the same Old Testament was rarely read. New Testament epistle and New Testament gospel were read the same two readings every single year. And when pastors tried to preach on those, it didn't take long before they had pretty much the same thing to say. So every other year, if you went epistles 1 year and gospels 1 year, the third year you've got the same texts again. The 3-year cycle at least gives you kind of close to 9 years if you want to keep going with the different texts. Obviously life changes, and so there are things that will be different about our life even if the text is there. And my intention is always to try to learn more about the text each time and get a kind of a deeper awareness of it. But as we are looking here to say, well, I really don't understand it all, don't be surprised. I don't understand it all yet either. But I maybe have had a few insights that I've gotten that I can share with you that will help you just to catch some more things along the way. So, for example, Nahash of Ammon dies. Who was Nahash? A king. Okay? And what do we know about him from the past? Nahash is the king who said to the people in Jabesh Gilead, I am going to poke out your right eye. And Saul came and rescued them from Nahash. Now, Nahash of Ammon, you might know that today the city, the capital city of Jordan is Amman. Same word. So that's Rabbah of the Ammonites. That's the same city. So you're going to have geography dictating a lot. If you have a city that's on a promontory point and you can get to water somehow, they're going to keep rebuilding the cities there. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Doesn't always work, but here it kind of does. So Nahash is the enemy of Saul, because Saul has come and has defeated him and his people and gathered all those people from the northern kingdom. This only real bright spot in the whole story is Saul. Well, David, who is at enmity with Saul, and Nahash would know that David is being pursued and has to flee finally to the Philistines. When David takes over as king, even though he was a servant of Saul for a while, he seems to have had a good relationship with Nahash. And we looked at in chapter 8 and 9 all the different places where there were attacks and where David went and claimed land, even to put up a stele, a kind of a memorial stone, right up by the Euphrates. And if you go all the way back to Genesis 12 and following, you find out that Abraham was promised land from the river of Egypt, which is not the Nile, but the Wadi El Arish that comes out of the Sinai into the Mediterranean. From there, all the way up to the Euphrates, which kind of does an angle like this and like this around, and so somewhere up in that area, it's off our map here, but so we would find out then in chapter 8 that David claimed all the land that had been promised to Abraham. That was his job. Okay, so almost 900 years before this, that's a pretty long time for a promise to be kept, but it's kept there. Well, so Nahash now, when he dies, his son Hanun rebels. People are always rebelling. Yesterday is the reason. Taxes are too high.
No.
Okay, taxes are too high. And so we need to find a way to not have to give money to somebody else so that they won't attack us. I remember Yasser Arafat one time said about the Israelis, we will make peace with them until we don't have to. So as long as we are in a weak position, then we'll make peace. If we can get strong enough, then we will revolt and rebel. And of course, any of us who have watched the Arab-Israeli conflict realize it is never going to solve. And there are issues on the table which are so different for each side that it's impossible to really get everybody to resolve their concerns with it. Well, anyway, David sends some envoys to say, we're sorry this happened. We still do that today. There was a squabble when there were killings in France about why the president did not go and send John Kerry. And why didn't he go as the most important person from our country? And we've got these kinds of things that are going on all the time. How do you let somebody know how serious you are about how sorry you are? Well, David sends his envoys, and they shave half of their hair and half of their beard off and cut their clothes off halfway and send them packing. What do you call that?
Shame.
Revolt.
Oh, well, yeah.
You call that revolt.
Yeah.
You call that, the shame in the first sense, but it's revolt. We're not going to pay taxes to you anymore. We don't respect you. We don't want to be your friend. And so David says, well, now you guys, you stay in Jericho until your beards grow out. And we'll give you some clothes to fix up the clothes that you had cut half off. And so we'll get you taken care of. We'll get you taken care of, and so just stay there. So the Ammonites are wanting to rebel and not pay taxes. And remember, chapter 8 is the one with Mephibosheth in there. Chapter 8 is the one that says David either took land all the way to the north and up toward the east up into Syria, or he made treaties with people. There are some places where he makes treaties, some places where he simply attacks and controls the land. So now Haman is going to hire the Syrians. The Syrians up there in Damascus and beyond are going to join with the Ammonites, who are more to the east. So the Ammonites are, oops, I'm sorry, I was the wrong one. The Ammonites are going to be here kind of east of the Sea of Galilee, and then Damascus and Syria up here. We're beginning to see the Arameans show up now. Who has been our big country up until now that's been a troublemaker? Huh?
In the Middle East?
Back in the Bible stories. In the Bible stories. The Philistines. Okay. The Egyptians had controlled this land in the late Bronze Age, the land of the great Canaan, or the era of the great Canaanite cities. And then the Philistines kind of came in and took over, and the Egyptians don't show up as much yet. They will come a little bit later. So from the south and west, we're going to have them. But now it's from the north and the east. And you might know that the language spoken by Jesus was Aramaic, a version of the Semitic languages. And so Aram is the name of the region. That's where the word Aramaic comes from. And Aram Naharaim is the land between the two rivers, which either is that little knik in the northwestern part of the Euphrates, or the entire land of what we would now call Iraq. And people have advocated for both of those. But when the Jews come back from Babylon, they will be speaking Aramaic. And they may know Hebrew, like somebody who would come here from Germany, and they might be still speaking German. Their kids are probably going to learn English and may not know as much German. And so they didn't all know. By the time they came back, by the time of a couple centuries before Jesus, almost nobody speaks Hebrew anymore. And so Aramaic, and the way they even wrote the letters, becomes the standard. And so it goes on from there. But the Syria, or the Arameans, they are going to be a problem for the next 200 years. They are going to continue. We're going to see them and things going back and forth. So Joab, first of all, defeats the Syrians. So Joab goes into one battle. His brother Abishai goes into another battle. And they have defeated the Syrians. So the people kind of north and east, as we go in what we call the Fertile Crescent. But the Ammonites just to the east, they want to come west and take the land that is in the northern part of Israel and control the area that would be all around in here and down toward the lower regions where the Jordan River flows. So at this point then, let's see. I just want to list Zobah, the Maacathites, and Tov are also involved in this. They don't all get to win the battle. But anyway, after the Arameans decide that they are going to attack again, and then David wins once again, then all the kings under Hadad-ezer of Damascus are under David. So David, in essence, doesn't just defeat, but he takes over that land of Syria, marginalizing and minimalizing the people who are going to be the Ammonites. And so they're going to kind of push them back and kind of limit who is going to be able to work with them. Well, that's what you need to be able to get to chapter 11. Because now the only people left are the people just east of the Sea of Galilee and south of that some the Ammonites. And if memory serves me right, Amman, Jordan is about 42 miles from Jerusalem. So we're not talking long, big distances, okay? You'll go down into the Jordan Valley, and then there are high points, kind of steppe land to the east, and then you go on toward there. Back when Kathy and I were in Israel, you were smart not to get your passport stamped. So they would give you a separate sheet of paper, and they would stamp your passport just on a sheet of paper. Because if you were stamped with a passport, in your passport from Israel, none of the other countries around there would let you in.
It's still that way.
Is it still that way? Okay, so still even right now?
Yeah.
Okay. And I've not tried to go back, and we didn't have the money to try and go anyway. It would have been nice to go across the Allenby Bridge and go into the country of Jordan, or to go into Lebanon, or maybe to go up into Syria, but that does not surprise me. And so I had a friend who flew from Jerusalem to Cyprus, and then Cyprus to Lebanon. And so you just make sure you don't get stamped, and because they would just say, we're not going to recognize them if you've been there, you don't belong in our country, right? But it's a long way around for not a real long trip, actually. And so at this point then, in chapter 11, David says, okay, you guys, go and attack and defeat Ammon, or the Ammonites in Rabbah. But he stays home this time. And he stays home, and he sees Bathsheba. Now the word bat in Hebrew, B-A-T, is the word for a daughter. So it's nothing to do with her bathing. That only works in English. Okay, it just happens to work, but don't confuse those two. They're in no way connected. But what is more important is that she is purifying herself from her period. So this would mean that she is now probably in the highest point for being able to get pregnant. Right? And he happens to see her now. Here's the question, and we'll have quite a few questions right now. Was she trying to entice David?
Yep.
I have a yes.
I don't know how we can know from the.
How many say yes, how many say no?
I don't
Yes.
know.
How many say yes?
How many
Okay.
say I don't know?
How about choice 3?
Okay, choice 3. How many don't know?
I don't know. It
Okay.
could go either way.
But you see, as I read it, I may read my thoughts about what she's doing into the story.
Yeah.
And this is a wonderful case in point of, we don't know hardly anything.
Yeah.
Why does she live near the king?
The husband was a high-ranking official.
Bodyguard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has 30 men who are his personal bodyguard. So they all live right around the palace. So, and the palace is going to be a little bit higher up, so she's just a little bit, her house would be a little bit lower down. She's purifying herself, bathing on top of the roof. There is a professor who I think was at St. Catherine's, she's out east now somewhere, Gail Yee, who did her doctoral work on this text. And I remember hearing either her say it or someone about what she said, that so many of the answers we don't know. And I also read a book back in the late 80s by a fellow named Meyer Sternberg, who was a Jewish scholar. The book was published out of University of Indiana Press. And you talk about not knowing and having something go over your head. I read his book, which is called The Poetics of Biblical Narrative. So it's not just a story, but a little bit elevated story. And he had like maybe 8 or 10 different essays that were in there of studies that he had done. And I read probably 150 pages halfway through that book or close to it before I figured out what he was doing. And then all of a sudden it made pure sense. And then it spoiled for me a lot of other reading of people who just would repeat the story. And so you look at a lot of commentaries, and they just say in different words what you have here instead of trying to get deeper. But the thing that Meyer Sternberg was doing is looking deeper into the story and saying, what don't we know? And he taught me how to make sure, or at least to think about what do we know and not. And commentators will have different ideas on everything. That's why no matter how many books I would ever read on 2 Samuel, none of them would ever completely agree. Because on this point or that point they would say, well, this is there or this is not there. But David is going to see her. He has stayed home because he's probably getting older than they either want him to go to battle or older than they want to get him killed. In other words, either he's too weak to go or they just say, we don't want you to go in battle. Just see how the country of Great Britain feels when their prince is in the Air Force. They don't like that at all. Keep him safe, and so the opponents are going to have a field day trying to get that particular unit, because if they can kill the prince, then they will have bragging rights for the next 5 decades. And so the same kind of thing may be going on here again, we don't know for sure. But in any case, he summons her. Now, the reason I ask about whether she was in on it is she traded up, didn't she? By the time it's all done, she's the queen mother, and her son will be King Solomon. Now, she may not have all that in mind right now, obviously. But, it's sort of, somebody said once that the most suspicious people in the world are pastors and homicide detectives. Because you've heard a lot of stuff that you begin to scratch your head, I'm not sure if that one's right. I think probably higher than pastors I would put grade school teachers and high school teachers, because they've seen it all. I heard once that teachers will often ask if they get called to jury duty, can you just put me off till June, when I'm out of school. And so they say, don't ever go to trial in June. Because if teachers are the jury, they've heard it all. They aren't going to believe anything you have to say. So, anyway, so David has sex with her, and he gets her pregnant. So she sends and says, I'm pregnant. So, what does David do next?
He was really honorable.
Yeah.
He's very honorable.
Oh,
What does he
yes.
do next?
Well, he calls for Uriah, right?
He calls for Uriah to come home.
Right.
Why?
So that he could
Sleep
sleep
with
with
her.
her.
Yeah, you go down and have sex with her,
Yeah.
then everybody will think it's your kid.
Yeah.
If your wife is pregnant, you've been in Afghanistan for 2 years, gets a little suspicious along the way. And so the very same kind of thing. Now, next question. Does Uriah know what's going on?
Well, we don't really know.
We don't know. We don't know. The traditional thing, which has been talked about in sport as well, is that football players, I remember, do you remember the McCords, Dale? Darius McCord was the football player, and the parents lived down the street from us. And I don't remember what the son's name was who was a paper boy with me, but kids, high school, and all that. He said, my brother can't have sex before football games. because that would make him weaker. You
How
know,
old was he?
you, huh?
High
How
school.
old was he?
Well, Darius McCord was a football player. His brother was the one who was telling us,
Okay.
you know, on the paper station. But the idea is when, I remember this with the Italian soccer team. They got to the semifinals and coach said no sex with your girlfriends or your wives. And they lost the next game and a lot of people laughed and said they didn't want to wait, even to win the World Cup. Okay? But this is not, I mean, this is wisdom for a lot of people. So here, Uriah may be saying if I have sex, I might be weak when I go into battle and not have strength to be in battle. What does he say? He says, I can't go to do this because the ark of God is with the battle. So they've got the ark over there like they did with the Philistines. Didn't apparently learn their lesson. So he said the ark of God is not settled. I can't do that either. So he sleeps with the other people, the other guys who are down by the base of the palace. The next night, David says, why don't you go down? He gets him drunk. He says maybe he'll be drunk enough to lose his inhibitions and go down and have sex with his wife. So, then he says, okay, the next thing that I have to do is shut his tongue. So, the guy's carrying his own death warrant and doesn't know it. The normal thing is if you had a message from the king, you would open it up and you would read it to whomever was going to get it, like Joab here. He doesn't do that. Joab, I don't know who can read and who can't read. So he brings that back and he gets cut down with arrows. Later it will say he got cut down with the sword. Cut down by the sword, which is a general word for battle, I guess, because it says he got too close to the wall and the arrows got him. And so he dies. Now, what position is David in?
Basically, the murderer.
He is a murderer. What has he done? He has shut Uriah up. And along with shutting Uriah up, who is going to wonder when the other soldiers say, oh, that's too bad that Uriah, one of the mighty men, got killed. There's 37 of them altogether, even though it says the 30, so some of them had to be replaced, probably when someone died. But now everyone will think, oh, we heard Bathsheba's pregnant. That Uriah, he went down and had sex with his wife. And he came back weak, and that's why he died. So David can leave the impression that she's pregnant by Uriah. And Uriah died, and leave it to your own imagination. Well, went home, had sex, shouldn't have. Who's not talking? The boys in the band who sit down at the palace gate. They know better, or they will be killed as well. And it's almost a surprise that they didn't get killed just because David didn't want anything said. But if you're beholden to the king, so then she delivers the baby, and after the suitable time for mourning, he takes her into his harem, as it were, as one of his wives, and everything seems to be going just fine. He feigns being angry. Why did you do that? And he even knows some history. See, he did study history. Because he says that Gideon's son got killed because he got too close to that one tower. And the millstone got thrown down on his head. Why didn't you worry about that? And then the comment comes, oh, and by the way, Uriah died. Well, those things happen. That's going to come home to roost in his own household. Okay? When those things happen. When he has said, don't you dare lay a hand on Absalom. And he gets killed by Joab's direction anyway. Okay, so she becomes David's wife, and this is kind of like the Abigail, the widow of Nabal. It's Bathsheba, the widow of Uriah. They never quite forget that they had been married before. But David looks like he's this big, grand, glorious, honorable person who takes her in. And while her husband died, I'll take care of her. Wonderful social ministry. He's doing this wonderful thing, except we know what he really did. And so the plot thickens. Now, a lot of these things, we don't know who's involved and how they're involved. We don't know if Bathsheba's in it. It sure turns out well for her. And this happened all the time in what we call the ancient world, where, in fact, that's what happens with Herod when Herod's wife had been married to Herod's brother Philip. She traded up. And that's when John the Baptist says, you're not supposed to have your brother's wife. She doesn't like that and ends up getting his head chopped off. Okay? But don't think this is brand new or rare. If I can trade up and have better of everything, I'll do it. So marriages are often of convenience and not simply of love or whatever. So chapter 12.
48 years for us yesterday.
Huh?
48 years for us yesterday.
Congratulations.
Almost 50.
Almost to 50, huh?
Almost.
Well, yours is coming up, what?
I was 9 years old when we were married.
Yeah.
That was fine.
Oh, we're only gonna make 95 or 45 this summer.
Big one?
So we're chasing you, and I'd like to keep chasing you. So. By the way, this is random, but does anybody know what yesterday was? Why were the flags at half-staff?
Titanic.
Not the Titanic, I don't
Oh,
think.
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln died 150 years ago yesterday. And,
Thanks for telling us that.
Yeah.
We made our days.
so he had been dead 102 years when you got married. So.
I was baptized on June 6th, that's D-Day.
Yeah.
Oh,
We're running good.
If you live long enough, there's something that happens on every day. And I was born on May the 4th, and that's Star Wars. May the 4th be with you.
yeah.
My friend David Book is the one who laid that one on me. So he calls me this, May the 4th be with you. But anyway, now we get, everybody would assume that David is an honorable king, except Yahweh. Yahweh's not particularly impressed with the deal. And so he sends Nathan. Remember, we've seen Nathan before. Nathan is the one who said to him, make sure that you realize you and your family will be a dynasty. So 2 Samuel 7, he is a major player in that whole story. Nathan and Gad are the two. Gad was the one that said to David, go hide your parents over by the Moabites. And so Nathan comes now, and he tells this story about the rich man and the poor man. Now, in Jewish tradition, if your neighbor came to you, and your neighbor didn't have anything to serve, and you had an animal, even a pet animal, and they got visitors, it would be okay to take it. Okay, if your neighbor had nothing, and they wanted to host someone who came. Kathy and I went in northern Germany with my folks in 1972, or in East Germany in 1972, and my grandpa's brother Edward, they kept the postcard from coming through. They sent a postcard, didn't know what they would do. So they had gone to bed early because they were going to walk several miles to go get their winter load of potatoes. And all they had in the house that they could give us, I think there were maybe 3 or 4 eggs. That's all the food they had in the house. And those, they would cold storage them for like 6 months, and the eggs were all bad. So they made them up, and then they weren't even any good to eat. So, you come and you would expect that you can at least put something on the table. When we went into Lithuania, we went by where my grandpa had been born, on the farm next to that, and those people, they made up a dinner for us right away. From what they had. They had the old stoves with the old iron stoves and everything still, and they had a 2-pound, kind of like 2-pound rye or pumpernickel or something like that. They had a big butter that was there, but they made a meal right away. So Jewish tradition said if you get unexpected company, it's okay, even if it's their pet. But this guy's got a whole bunch of them, and he doesn't want to have it cost him any. And so the real story, David is so angered about this injustice that's been done, and then that man is you. You're the one. You could have had the pick of any wife in the kingdom. So here's Yahweh saying through Nathan, it's okay if you have a bunch of wives. It's okay, you're a king, you can do that. But why did you take your neighbor's wife? And so, was David interested in taking his neighbor's wife?
Was he interested?
Yeah.
It just happened.
Well, it didn't just happen, because Bathsheba probably lived there more than 3 days. I mean, she was probably there all the time, except Uriah was usually home. But was he interested in making her his wife or just having sex with her?
We don't know.
Okay, see, that's another one of those parts of it, we don't know what's going on with that. Okay, was this a one-time fling, he just, got turned on, or was he trying to get her away?
Yeah.
Again, we have no idea. So he says, now the sword will never depart from your house. His first son Amnon will be killed by Absalom. Absalom will be killed. Adonijah will be killed. This little baby dies. And so there are a lot of consequences. And this is this thing about the built-in consequences of someone's sin. It's not like God decides to send something to somebody. It's the built-in consequence of what they have set in motion. Which is why it's so hard in Job's case, because he says, I didn't set anything this bad in motion. But the normal way that Deuteronomy and Joshua and Judges and Samuel and Kings talks is sooner or later something's going to happen. There will be a consequence of what you have set out, and that's the boomerang theory. Actions and consequences are linked together. In fact, the strange part of it is, why doesn't it happen sooner? What should have happened? What should Adam and Eve have done to Cain?
Well, show them.
They should have put him to death.
Yeah.
He killed his brother, they should have put him to death. And though it's rape, we're going to see very soon, what should David have done to Amnon for raping his half-sister? Should have put him to death. And so David here becomes kind of a scaredy cat or whatever, or emotions or love or whatever it is. And so you start voting on, well, what's important, what's not important here, and how is this going to be? So, a couple of very interesting things in this passage. First of all, David says, I have sinned. And we know Psalm 51. I was born in sin did my mother conceive me. But he doesn't prevaricate and say, well, what's it to you? Who do you think you are? Off with your head. He respects the prophet enough that he doesn't start mouthing off to him. He acknowledges, I've sinned against Yahweh. Remember Joseph in Egypt. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God by having sex with someone else's wife? And so to realize that sin is a relation with God, not just with people. So sin is against people whom God has created to be in a certain relationship, and you put them in a different relationship. All right, so the question here is, what did God make us to be, and what do we do, or are we tempted to do that would go outside that relationship? So it means really, in the best sense of the word, finding out what did God build us to be. Not just what does God want us to do, but what did he build us to be? What has he done in creation? So Jesus, for example, will say, from the beginning it was not so to be able to write a writ of divorce. From the beginning he made them male and female and said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it or take care of it or keep it in line, however you want to translate the word rude. But that kind of a thing is, how do I discover that? When I read through the scriptures, I have to pick out from there, what are the things that would be honorable? So if I know, and please don't misunderstand when I say this, but we don't really know even how they dealt with something like the 10 words, the 10 commandments. And all the rest of the instructions. We know that those are written down, we know that they've got a long history, but we don't know if they were thinking in that framework, like let's say the Pharisees at the time of Jesus, who knew backwards and forwards all the various laws and traditions. I mean, they're not going to synagogue service at this point. Synagogues don't show up until after the exile. And once every 7 years, it says, they would renew the reading of the covenant. But we never find it referred to after Joshua that they ever did it until the time of Ezra. That's going to be after the exile. So there's, today is tornado warnings.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at 1:45, and there's tonight as well at 6:55? Okay, and we're supposed
That's
to,
the Minnesota one. This is the nationwide one.
okay, and we're supposed to find a safe place. What can be safer than down here?
I don't know.
So,
We can-
David then is told, okay, you will not die. But the baby that was born to you in Bathsheba will die. If you want to find a Bible text in the Old Testament that irritates people who do not want to believe in God as a loving God, this is the one. More than any other text. What did that innocent little child do? Well, you might remember from Exodus, it says the sins of the fathers come on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, and all sin is an act of hatred toward God. I don't want you being my God, I want to do things my own way. And if it is that we make God in our own image, and we want to be like God, knowing good and evil, and we decide what that's going to be, it's very easy to say, well, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. So people who will be very irritated about this text are simply trying to say, that kind of God I don't want, because I already am doing a good enough job in my own life. Right? One of the hard things to understand is that when we are reading the scriptures, we are to be advocates for how it talks and not fight against it. Not say, well, I don't like that part of the Bible. But to try to say, how does it fit in with God's scheme? Because God's ways are not always our ways. And, it's not to justify it any more than the Joshua and Judges material with go and kill those people, or the line where it says David lined all the soldiers up and two lines full he killed, the third line he spared. Those are not nice things and easy things to read. They are things about battles and war, and God says, I will protect you from all of those around you, but those people were his creation too. And so it's not like I want to justify it, but I want to at least say, when things probably irritate me the most, it's probably when I realize I'm not in charge, and God says I'm in charge, and I will do things my way. So, the flood, that really ought to irritate us a lot more than this. It's almost all but 8 people. But this one looks just completely, perfectly innocent. Well, we as Lutherans say, well, nobody's innocent. But the child really did nothing to deserve what it got. And it's going to be a burden on David's heart and Bathsheba's heart. But doesn't take but a few seconds in the text, and then Solomon is born. We shouldn't just take that as, oh, that's okay, they got another one.
No, that's right.
There was a consequence that it brought on, just as Amnon brings on consequences, Absalom brings on consequences, Adonijah brings on consequences, the whole bunch of them. And so it's not this thing of, oh, everybody is free and everything is nice and wonderful, and they just had a grand old time. The tensions starting here already are who is going to succeed. And if this child hadn't died, this child would have been the next king, very likely, because he's maybe the first one born in Jerusalem. And that's what Solomon has going for him, because he's going to be king over the north, over the south, and over Jerusalem. And the older sons, they were born elsewhere. So this one would be able to claim, I kind of have some connection with all of it. We don't even get the boy's name. And everybody wonders, why is David doing what he is? Because he fasts. And it takes 7 days. The guess is we don't necessarily have a 7-day-old baby here.
No.
Okay, it's nothing that says that Bathsheba gave birth in the morning and Nathan comes to David that evening. It's just not said what's going on with that. But when the child dies, and then before the child dies, he's mourning. Well, this is classic. When I think I can get God to do something, I'll keep trying to look sorry. The standard is that you mourn after something happens. Why? You want to look so pathetic that God will feel so sorry for you, he won't whack you anymore. Now, my dad never said it, but Dale's dad said, if you don't quit whimpering, I'm going to give you something to cry about. And my dad never had to do that with me. But Dale, on the other hand.
Poor Dale.
Poor Dale. Poor Dale, nothing. Poor Dale, nothing. He knows where all the false statements are. That's the way it goes. So anyway, they do take the city of Rabbah. They do defeat it. David is actually the one who kind of cleans up the deal and goes to finally do the taking of that all and gets the spoils. So, the section now on who comes next. I'm going to stop now and start at 2. Because 13 through 19 is another whole chunk altogether. So we'll take our 10-minute break right now. Yes?
I just, really quickly, haha. Could you say, would it be appropriate or inappropriate to say that with the birth of Solomon that God will work good out of evil?
He's got nothing but evil to work with.
Yeah.
Okay? He's got nothing but old sinful nature to work with. And so whatever he does, he has to work with people who are sinners.
So he's worked good with Solomon.
Maybe.
Maybe, yeah, that was what I was wondering.
When we see the Solomon
Maybe.
story, we'd have to say, not so sure.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Oh.
Because he's going to crash and burn worse than David did and cause
Yeah.
everything to fall apart.
Yeah.
So I really think God has to work through whatever's there. And everybody is a sinner. He makes some saints who don't act like it always. But I'm really nervous about pulling those strings of, every little thing. And I know it happens, and I know people will act on something that comes into their heart, and they believe that God is giving them some nudge or some guidance or something. That's not the point.
Yeah.
But what I worry about is, I get in a car wreck tonight and get paralyzed so God can work good for some people.
That's dangerous ground.
I know, but that's often what's done, and so that's the kind of thing I'm concerned about.
Sure.
That, so if somebody thinks that God's doing something that looks really terrible so that good can be done, does God need to do that to get good done? The Holy Spirit can work whether or not somebody is paralyzed, let's say. And so a lot of times people will try to make sense of their very difficult circumstances by saying, well, God has used this to open doors for me that would have never been opened otherwise. And all of that is true. But if you go back to the next step and say, I think God probably caused this accident that caused me to be paralyzed. I was innocent and some drunk driver hit me so that I have more access. I'm not sure that's the God of the Bible.
Yeah.
That he works with the foolishness that people do,
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah.
But whether he does it in advance, and even if there are times that it would say it, I would be hesitant to try to figure out in my life every last little piece and how those things all fit in. So there are events that have happened in all of our lives that have given us opportunities to understand, to grow, to live, whatever. But whether or not he is causing those things to happen, or whether Satan is, or whether it's just part of a broken world that we get to be left in until he comes again, that's when, usually when we step over that line, that's when a lot of people will try to make sense of their troubles, that God is trying to use it for something, and a lot of other people will say, with a God like that, I don't want to be that kind of a person. So chapter 13 now. 13 through 19 is the story about what happens with his sons. The question now becomes, who is going to succeed David? Why is that a question?
He's got a lot of sons for one thing.
Yeah, but why is it a question?
Isn't it always the oldest that was?
Well, it could be that, but the oldest ones are going to kind of get knocked off like pins in the bowling alley. But why is it a question?
I don't understand the question.
I know. It's a question because of 2 Samuel 7. One of your descendants will always rule on the throne. The promise of a son who will always be ruling. In the northern kingdom, as we're going to see next, well, not next week, but the week after, there are dynasties that will come, and very often it is the father who maybe reigns for 25 years, the son may reign for a year or two and get killed off by the general, who says, I can be a better king. We have very few actual dynasties where it goes more than just the 2 generations. But here, it says one of your descendants will rule, and with the very skinny little break of a few years when a woman who married a king takes over and thinks that she can rule, when the dynasty goes down to just one boy, for the next 400 years, it's going to be one of David's sons. So the question here is going to be, all right, which one? But the point is, when we look at the New Testament and it says that Jesus is the son of Abraham, the son of David, that's important because of 2 Samuel 7. Because Nathan promised one of your kids will always rule. And for the 600 years after Jerusalem gets burned down, when they come back and all the rest of it, there is no son of David ruling. And the New Testament says, oh, that's not going to be a king. Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. Right? It's not going to follow this world's pattern, but he is going to be the son of David who is going to reign forever and ever. So that son of David will eventually be the one who fulfills what's said in 2 Samuel 7 in a way nobody would expect. Right? And he, when he says, I'm going up to Jerusalem to die, in Mark 8, for example, right after Peter says, you are the Christ, you are the Messiah, you are the anointed one, you are the David figure. He says, oh, I'm going up to Jerusalem, they're going to kill me. And Peter says, no, you can't do that. Because he doesn't understand what the fullness of the kingship is really all about. The New Testament is here because you would never really figure it out by just reading the Old. Okay, it's the Holy Spirit has to say, hey, there's something going on here I didn't tell you about. And so everyone who says, well, we've got all of the list of all of the things that they were all waiting for, when we get to the New Testament, we're going to find out that people in the New Testament are kind of surprised. Mary is surprised about, what is this? I'm a virgin. Why didn't she hop up and down and say, I'm the virgin, huh? Because they really weren't waiting for that. And when Jesus says, I'm going up to Jerusalem to die, why didn't Peter get out the bus and say, we've been waiting for you to say this thing so we can get you up in Jerusalem and get you killed, so you can save us from our sins?
But they knew that, didn't they?
No.
They didn't get it. They didn't get it.
They didn't understand. I mean, he doesn't say, I'm going up to Jerusalem to die so I can save everybody from their sins in that direct kind of a sense, which is why they're clueless about it. And we need the whole New Testament to say, here's the bigger picture of what God was really working on. All right? And so I want you to think about looking at the story of what's already happened, like you're looking in a rowboat at where you've come from, but not to think that every single page is so clear about what's going to come. Because when the New Testament comes, they don't get it. They don't get it. How come the women buy 100 pounds worth of spices?
Because they thought his body was still
They thought his
there.
body was there and he was dead.
Oh,
Okay? They weren't waiting for him to rise from the dead,
Even though he said he was.
even though he said he would. And we need Paul and Peter and James and John to explain this is what was really going on
Yeah.
with all of that. So the return of the kingdom is really the return of the Garden of Eden. We don't have that here now because in essence Israel, David's kingdom in Jerusalem is the Garden of Eden. As close as you're going to get in a fallen world. I'm with you, I protect you, I care for you, I protect you from your enemies. What we're going to see is that a lot of them made peace treaties with the enemies and lifted the curtain up so they could come in. Instead of saying, watch out, we don't need them. And so the real trouble for us as Christians is we believe in Jesus, but there's also other things that kind of fit nicely that we would like to bring in as well. And those are the things often that can make it very exciting and very interesting. And that's where we begin to speculate without knowing what we're speculating about. It's really at which points that instead of letting God be God, we've got to come up with, well, we want an answer to this, or we need to know how this fits in. And that's what I think an honest read of the scriptures will spoil. I'd like all those answers too. But if we can't get them, and it turns us away from the Lord and away from evangelism and telling people the good news because we're instead trying to explain to them why everything is happening, we're not doing anyone any favors. So we're saved by grace through faith. We're not saved by understanding God. Yes, ma'am.
So in the Bible, when Samuel, where it says, your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me, your throne will be established forever. With hindsight, is that going to be, can we say that's the thread to the Messiah?
Yes.
With hindsight.
But nobody there would have thought that God himself was going to come into the flesh by
Right.
what you read in 2 Samuel 7.
Okay, but, yeah, that's
Okay?
right.
And so, just, you know, in other words, I know this is so common. I know it's so common. But to be walking around saying all of these people, they had Cecil B. DeMille music playing in their ears, and they saw all of these things coming together, and they were so excited about it. Why did the Pharisees and Sadducees and religious leaders kill Jesus?
Because he's
Their,
a
their
threat.
positions were threatened.
Yeah, but why wouldn't they have known enough from the scriptures to say, this is how God's doing this? And so I don't want to impose upon people complete full knowledge of something. Let's look at what Nathan says, look at what the people who knew those texts were looking for, and not jump to something where, oh, they all knew everything automatically. It's really hard because we've all been taught, well, everybody in the Old Testament, they knew everything. If they did, then I can't understand why Jesus wouldn't have been welcomed and why he would have been put to death. And so there are parts of the story about God restoring us to himself that are deeper than what we have revealed here. We call that progressive revelation. And so instead of saying, well, I want the Bible to say this, so I'm going to make it say that. You know, I would rather say, okay, what do we know so far? What did Nathan say? And yes, the New Testament's going to tell us Jesus is finally the full and final one who takes the kingdom back, who is a descendant of David according to the standard. But at this point, if you said, well, when is the Messiah coming? You might say, I don't know, maybe he's still taking a nap. So when you talked about a Messiah anywhere, in anything here at 1st and 2nd Kings, you're going to be talking about the king in Jerusalem. And they would not have had the same context that we do. They would just not have thought of that at all. That only comes after Jerusalem's burned down. And then there are people who pick up 2 Samuel 7 and say, we're waiting for that to get fulfilled. There is no palace that's going to be built in Jerusalem. They'll rebuild the temple, they don't build a palace. And they look to the high priest as the anointed one who is in charge of Jesus' day. And you see what he does to Jesus. So just keep it in the back of your mind, you know, and try and just say, okay, where do I want to make sure I don't read more in than is here? In the New Testament, they may say, oh, this was here and we didn't see it. So they may pick up on texts, but at this point, let's not infer that all of those people knew everything of what was going to take place. They're looking in Jerusalem, and the kingdom that God promises is in a broken world. But he says, I'll protect you from everybody, you'll be at peace. Jesus would have come even if they'd have all been faithful. Because there's more trouble than you can solve with this kingdom. And so we're going to go into a much deeper level of eternal life and eternal death when we get to the New Testament. And this is just a nice window into God's mercy and love for people in spite of all of their foibles. Some don't do it so well. So the oldest son, Amnon, the second one, Absalom, the third one, Adonijah, are all going to have trouble. So when somebody says to me, well, the king whose name starts with an A, or the prince whose name starts with an A, yeah. So, first one, Amnon wants to have sex with his half-sister Tamar. Full sister to Absalom, not his full sister. All sorts of theories about whether that was permissible, and people will talk about Abraham and Sarah, and is it okay to marry if there are different mothers and the same father? Was it through the matrilineal line that as long as it wasn't that you had the same mother, it would be okay? He doesn't want to marry her, he just wants to have sex with her. He is just really turned on by her, and so his cousin Jonadab says, why don't you act sick and let her come in and then take her? The real deep insight from this is as soon as he gets done raping her, he says, get her out of here. And that there was never any love whatsoever in the whole thing. There's nothing about love or marriage or anything like that. And she says, you could have that. So this is rape and this is incest. Both of them. That little sentence, there are lots of pages in books that argue about different answers to that. That little sentence took me a lot of reading. But anyway.
Which little sentence?
That it's both rape and incest.
Oh.
That is going on there.
Yep.
So Absalom, the full brother, says, oh, don't worry about it. Now, I'll just give you a little hint. You're going to have 2 years that Absalom is plotting to kill his brother Amnon. You're going to have 3 years that he's going to be up by the Sea of Galilee with his mother's parents. Then you're going to have 4 years that he kicks around in Jerusalem before he gets himself anointed as king down in Hebron. So we're 9 years in this little process here. Okay, so there's this time, this time, this time, as he is plotting, first of all, to get back at his brother. Dad didn't do it, I have to. Dad has wimped out, he doesn't belong to be, he doesn't deserve to be a king. That's really what is in Absalom's mind here. Dad didn't do what's right. He should have punished my brother. And how, you know, that really doesn't get stated there. But David at first hears that all of his kids are dead. Sheep shearing, you might remember the story about Nabal. And that's when Nabal and Abigail, where Nabal won't send any food to David and his men, and Abigail says, let's go send them some food. And then Nabal has a heart attack, in my mind, or a stroke, and then dies. And sheep shearing, great time. You're taking the wool then to market, and you're going to be able to get a nice high price for it, and so that's when you're harvesting your crop. So they talk about you sow in tears of sorrow and you reap with shouts of joy. Hoping, bringing in the sheaves, remember that. And so they would often mourn and lament when they planted. Oh, God, feel sorry for us and give us a good crop this year. Okay. Nowadays, I would imagine people sow in joy and hope and reap often with sadness. And get as much as I thought I was going to get this year. But if you think God is involved in it, then you're going to try to let Him know that you're aware of the fact that he is involved in this. And I've heard farmers who have said, it's great to watch the hand of God every year. Others who said, I planted this and it ought to come up. You know, who would think just in natural terms. I remember nurses in St. Mary's Hospital where I worked in St. Louis saying that some of the baby doctors would talk about the miracle of life every time a child was born. Others said, I brought another kid in the world today.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the same thing's going on, people are not all aware of it. So anyway, at this point, David finds out from Jonadab, who was Amnon's good friend, maybe acting kind of almost as his best man to arrange a marriage. And this is the one of his mom's, one of David's sister's kids, who gets one of his cousins to go and do this. And so he is a finagler as much as anybody around the story. He doesn't have a big role. Most of you wouldn't know Jonadab, and I'll forget his name every once in a great while too, like every 15 minutes. But you know, there's a lot of intrigue. How does the human heart work? And so you reflect on this a little bit. You say, well, that guy, he kept figuring out which way the wind was blowing, and kept changing to I'll be friend with this one or that one. So chapter 14 then. Joab has gotten Absalom back. So the 2 years have gone by. He's gotten permission for Absalom to come back from Grandma and Grandpa's place, but he did not get to see his father. David says, I don't want to see him. So David pulls the same kind of thing, or Absalom does the same thing that Samson did way back when. He sets fields on fire, wheat fields. Here, Absalom's living next door to Joab, and he burns down his wheat field. Joab says, what'd you burn my wheat field down for? You didn't get me in to see my dad. I wish I'd have stayed there or let me see him, and if he wants to put me to death, let him put me to death. I'm sick and tired of waiting. And this woman, wise woman from Tekoa. Tekoa is maybe 10 miles from Jerusalem. It looks over the Dead Sea. It's a kind of a nice high point of a town. Amos the prophet later will come from Tekoa. And my Dr. Father Hans Walter Wolf talked about the fact that there may be some cities where there were just kind of extra bunch of smart people around. Because both Amos, who will talk much about wisdom terminology, that there were some places where they had a little better handle on what the things of life were. Anyway, she comes and she says, I had only 2 sons. My husband died. My one son killed the other one in a fight. Nobody was there to stop them. And now the family, the clan, wants to put him to death. Probably as, you know, the vengeance, the blood guilt. We have to get rid of him before he pollutes the whole country. Remember Achan, who is put to death after he is stolen from Jerusalem, from Jericho. And so this idea of if we don't stop the plague, it's going to keep going worse. So if I permit something, if I allow it, if I say that's okay, don't worry about it, things will get worse, which is what Absalom would be saying David did with his son Amnon. He's not dealing with it, and so sooner or later the plague is going to really be even worse. We've got to stop it right now. So somewhere within that framework, she goes and she says to the king about her 2 sons. And it's a little bit of a jump because David didn't have just 2 sons. And she really didn't have 2 sons. Okay? Who knows if her husband was dead or not? She's just somebody from far enough away that David wouldn't know, who comes with a story to the king and says, I don't want my family line to be wiped out altogether, so would you give us a pass on this one? Kind of like the pass for Cain, that he doesn't get killed immediately, that he has a mark put on his forehead. And so you've got some cases where punishment is right now, the consequences are right there, and some where it's not. If God had really kept the strict letter of the law, Adam and Eve would have died right then, and that would have been the end of the whole universe, or at least the end of our planet. For some reason, he doesn't do it that way. Yes, sir?
So this blood guilt, when someone does evil, they kill the person so that this guilt the person has doesn't affect the rest of the people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
or the
if-
consequences of his
Let's say
ill
that,
deed will affect the other people, you think?
well, sooner or later, more people will get hooked up in the same thing, and when the consequences do come, it'll be even worse, which is what we call the flood, for example. Or what we call the destruction of Samaria and then Jerusalem. You didn't stop it. It's what they were talking about with Ebola. We've got to stop people from getting sick. We have to quarantine people. Otherwise, it's gonna keep going worse. And so they thought of sin kind of like we think of infectious diseases.
So then that goes back to my struggle with the sacrifices. Now you're stopping this evil plague by killing it, and it will take the guilt
Mhm.
and not come to me, or consequences come to me then.
And for us as Christians, we say Jesus took the guilt.
Yeah,
And if we are in that relationship with Him, then we are free of the guilt. The next sentence needs to be, go and live like that then. Live
Yeah.
as people who have been delivered, not as somebody who says, good, I got away with it once, I can get away with it again.
but we may still suffer the consequences.
You may suffer human consequences, but not eternal ones.
But these Old Testament people were trying to avoid the consequences, weren't they?
Everybody is.
But I mean, that's the whole idea of the sacrifice, sorta?
Well, not avoid it, but deal with it. Zap it on this goat. Acknowledge it and zap it on the goat.
Yeah.
See, David doesn't offer a sacrifice for what he did to Uriah. You can play all you want with whether he should have and whether that would have made any difference. I don't think so. But there is this sense that, and it's what Saul is really doing when he's seeing Stephen get stoned. We gotta stop this, because this is against God's will, and if we don't stop it now, it's gonna get worse. And so Judaism would be able to say, we didn't stop that Christianity thing, and look what happened. Right, and so you have to limit that, you know, keep it from spreading. It's the best I can come up with for it.
Interesting though, isn't it?
Yeah, but there are many cases where, you know, this is what ought to happen. You can keep it from happening, King. What, you know, the family's in the right to kill my son, because he killed his brother. But would you give us a pass on that one, because you're the king and you can do it, so that my family line doesn't get wiped out? And all of a sudden you get into bartering. And which is more important? I just reread the document from the Commission on Theology and Church Relations, a rather short document on the pastor-penitent relationship. At what point am I not bound to keep silent about something someone confesses to me? And to be honest, if you came and you told me you murdered somebody, technically that's all hearsay anyway. Even if you gave me all the details, I only heard it from your mouth. And so, but what if you say you're gonna murder somebody? Then I somehow have to decide, am I going to spare those other people? So in anything, you get to a point where you say, well, which one is the important one? We do that with the whole Bible. Which Bible verses are important? Which are the bottom line? Which is why some people will look to the book of Acts. The Lutheran Church usually, our church has usually looked to the book of Romans. What does it say about salvation? But many Christians will look to the book of Acts and say, okay, how can it tell me how we can do the work of the church? And how we should do evangelism. And I have a book upstairs that's called Missionary Methods, St. Paul's or Ours. And do we say, well, if it's in the Bible, then we follow that because that's what they did? Or do we say some of the things that they did in Acts didn't work? So we get to see all of it and see whether or not that seems to have worked. There is no big congregation in Athens.
All the
So-
women should have their head covered in their church. You know that.
Geez, give it up, would you?
Bible.
Chapter 14. So, here's the next part of it. David is asked about this thing, can you give mercy to your son? So she wheedles out of him that he would save her son And she said, what about yours? And he says, you've been talking to Joab. And she says, you know, there's not a thing that the king ever says that's not really smart and right on. Which is in a long way of saying, yep, he put me up to it. So then we get to chapter 15. Hit the right button, it moves. Still learning how to do that. You get to chapter 15, and Absalom gets himself a chariot and 50 men to either be his bodyguard. David had 30 men who were his mighty men, and now Absalom gets 50. And then it says he draws his heart away from his father. I had to quit teaching when the students didn't know anything about my references in the modern world. Let's see if any of you can tell me who Doug Llewellyn is, or was. Doug Llewellyn.
Isn't that guy on Jeopardy who won a lot of money or something?
No.
No, not Jeopardy, one of those games?
No. Dale?
He was someone on one of those judge shows.
He was judge on Judge Wapner's show.
Ah,
See why I went out of teaching?
oh, yeah, yeah.
So, thanks, John. After Judge Wapner would make his decision, then they would come out and Doug Llewellyn would interview both of them.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, I just always like the name Llewellyn because it starts with 2 L's. I
Yeah.
just think that's pretty neat, you know, a name that starts with 2 L's. And so Doug Llewellyn come out and say, well, what do you think of the judge? Every court case is going to be, he's a great guy, saw everything I was talking about, went my way. He's a bum. He wouldn't listen to me. Okay. So any court case, half of the people are going to be unhappy. That's the way it works with judges. You know, I mean, if you have an equal number of people on each side. And so Doug Llewellyn, and you could just expect it. And they do it with Judge Judy as well. I don't know. They don't show who's doing the interviews with Judge Judy. They just have each side talking back and forth about what they think. And I think, I don't see Judge Judy very often, I have at times, but I would guess maybe one time out of 50, somebody will come out and say, I was in the wrong and she helped me understand it. It's usually, didn't understand me, you know. You see that and you say, tape that one. Gotta show that one again. So what happens is Absalom stands outside the palace. And everyone who comes in, he says to him, what's your beef? My old man, he wouldn't listen to you. He's not going to argue for you. If I were king in Israel, I'd opt for you. I'd agree with you and what you're saying. And so this, if I were king in Israel, classic line. And so for 4 years, he plays Doug Llewellyn. And it's advertising. It's marketing. And you get people going back, particularly to the north. He's got some people in the south. That's his own family in Hebron. But people in the north, he's getting them on his side. Because there's always someone who's discontented with the result. And so, you know, everybody comes with a sullen face. Boy, I sure would have argued, I sure would have acted differently. It's sort of like all the people who say, well, how would you handle something if you were going to be president? It's easy unless you're running for president. Then you have to be a little more careful. You're not going to be president, you can say anything you want. Nobody's going to hold you to it. You're running for president, then they're going to hold you to it and maybe be playing an instant replay for you. This is what you said, this is what you did. And so here, he goes for 4 years, and then he goes down to Hebron, which is in the southern part of the country, west of the Dead Sea, where David had been king for 7.5 years. And he's got to have had some people down there as well who get tired of David. Because finally you get tired of everybody. Because nobody ever gives you everything you want. And so we elect new people because we live in hope. And maybe that lasts 2 days, maybe it lasts a month. Sooner or later, most everybody is unhappy about something. And well, maybe let's try the next one. Well, you're in more trouble if you have kings who are gonna have their sons who are gonna become kings, and you're never gonna get out of it. You're never gonna really be able to have what you want. So here's Absalom, and so the first thing he does is he gets himself appointed as king in Hebron. And everybody, oh, great, great, he's gonna do all this, and David learns that Israel is now following his son. Now here's the deal. It's that little drum beat that comes all the way through. How does David know whether Absalom becoming king is not part of the consequence of what he did to Uriah? See, if you've done something wrong, your guilt runs around with you forever. We're in trouble here in Egypt because we sold our brother into slavery. David doesn't know what all the consequences are. Doesn't say, well, you know, you're done now. And so he says, how do I know this isn't at the hand of God? So he says to the high priests who are going to have the ark, you guys stay here. Don't you come with me. And let me know what's going on. But you guys stay here. And so Ittai of Gath says, I'm coming with you. David says, look, you just barely arrived on the scene. Gath is part of the Philistine territory. He says, no, you guys go back. He says, no, I'm with you. So Ittai the Gittite, along with Abishai and Joab, are fleeing with him. They go down into the Kidron Valley, up the Mount of Olives, in essence, and then they're going to go from there, they're going to go down to the Jordan, and then they're going to cross it. Eventually they're going to go to Mahanaim. Mahanaim, the word Chana means to have a camp, and so Mahanaim is two camps. It's where Saul's son Ishbaal went to become king across the Jordan after his father and brothers were killed in battle, where what we call the northern kingdom was under Philistine control. He goes across the Jordan. It's where Jacob had split his family up into two camps, the Rachel and Leah side. So David flees across the Jordan on the way toward the Ammonites and the Moabites. Okay, and he's going to be with them some. He says to Abiathar and Zadok, and that's a very complicated story about who is high priest, but Abiathar is the great-great-grandson of Eli. When it says to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, Abiathar is the fourth generation following Eli. Next week we're going to find out he loses his job and Zadok takes over. And if you've ever heard of the Sadducees, they're connected with Zadok 1,000 years later. Okay, they're going to be the religious leaders. So David also sees a fellow named Hushai the Archite, and Ahithophel, who was one of the counselors. And some people have connected Ahithophel with Jerusalem, because one of the names for the city way back when was Ophel, O-P-H-E-L. And there's other theories about virtually everything. But some people think that Ahithophel may have been an advisor who lived in Jerusalem, and that when David took the city over, he just kept the administration, became king, but left some of them. That's one theory. The other one is that he is somebody who's from down in Judah. But in essence, Ahithophel doesn't seem to be real pleased with what David is doing. So he's ready to trade him in for Absalom. And so David says to Hushai the Archite, why don't you go back, and whatever Ahithophel says, you say the opposite. Okay, so just say the opposite. And because Ahithophel is so smart, they're probably going to listen to him, but God may use your words to confuse him. And so you may be able to confound, and the people may, or Absalom may do the opposite. So chapter 16, as they are fleeing, Ziba, and I'm sure you all remember Ziba. He is the servant who said to David, Mephibosheth is still surviving from the house of Saul. And so David said, Mephibosheth can live in my palace. Mary Baal is the other name that often is given to him. And you take care of his property. Well, remember Mephibosheth is lame. So when David is fleeing, Mephibosheth is later going to say, I wasn't able to get away. Don't you know I'm crippled? But Ziba says, oh, Mephibosheth is going to side with Absalom. And so he rats him out, and we don't know whether he was going to or not. No idea. My guess is he was not, but that he wasn't able to get away. And so then, there's a guy named Shimei who curses David. And this is the one where Joab and Abishai, I think, are the ones who say, why don't we lop that guy's head off? Shimei from the tribe of Saul, from the Benjaminites. And David says, I don't know if God's using his tongue to curse me. Maybe this is still part of what I'm getting because I killed Uriah, or got Uriah killed. Once you do something wrong, oh my goodness, the conscience just keeps on playing. And then you never know, is this happening? And a lot of the, I'm going to read the Bible to try and find out about God is, how do I get out of that which I did a long time ago? How can I ever escape that? Is God still remembering that, and is he giving me trouble with that? Well, anyway, Saul is, or Shimei is going along, it's kind of the high point in the road. You're kind of going down a wadi bed, and this is kind of above it, and he's cursing and throwing stones at him, and David says, leave him alone. Maybe God wants him to be saying all that. He's going to have to backtrack later, and Shimei is going to be groveling after a little bit. So anyway, Abishai is told, don't kill him. And then David says, the best I can hope is that God will be merciful to me. Hushai, the Archite, says, I will be in allegiance to you, David, but I'm going back, and I'm going to talk to Absalom as if I'm going to join him now. And then Ahithophel, they're leaving. David is leaving just as Absalom is arriving in the city. And so the first thing Ahithophel says is, go have sex with all the concubines up on the roof of the palace. Because that says, I'm the new king. I get to take over the harem. And so Absalom goes and does that. Now we might say, wait a minute, then he might be too weak to go to battle. Well, anyway, that's what he is told to do. And so then Ahithophel says, go pursue your father right away. Get him before he's organized. This amazed me. I don't know whether it was the first or the second Gulf War. Everybody knew we were going at Saddam Hussein for weeks. And they had everything positioned and ready. And I guess you got to take time to get the stuff there. But he still lost. But you would think, well, then you have time to get yourself prepared for fighting back. So get them before they're organized. And that, so Ahithophel says, you go chase after your dad right away. And Hushai says, you know, your dad's a sly guy. And he's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve. So don't go pursue him yet. Get yourself organized and then go after your father. Because you don't want to have a bad first 10 minutes of a battle because you didn't realize what your dad was going to do. And this is where David is right. Hushai says, do this, and Absalom should have listened to Ahithophel. Instead, he's, yeah, you're probably right. So he doesn't go after David right away, and by the time he does, then David has had time to organize. So, but anyway, as it goes on here, Hushai then lets David know what's going on by talking to the two priests' sons, Ahimaaz and Jonathan. So one from each of the two high priests, Abiathar and Zadok. And the kids are young enough that they can kind of go in and out. So they even get hidden in a dry well, and they put a cover over it and then throw dirt and straw over it and everything to look like there's not a hole there. And they were able, I mean, there's always some way to get a message to somebody. You know, it could be carrier pigeons, you know, it can be, you know, fires and lights and things like that. It can be email or, you know, Facebook or any of the kind of things. They're just all various versions of how do you let somebody know what's going on. And so David finds out what's going on. He knows he's got the day to begin to organize, and so he crosses the Jordan River to go on the east side by night. It's probably, I know more about the fact that you're going downhill, at least over by Jericho, by the Wadi Kilt. I would guess maybe it's no more than 5 or 6 miles. I may be really wrong on this, but it's not too far from Jerusalem to Jericho. But you're going way downhill one way and way back up if you're going from Jericho to Jerusalem. But they get to the Jordan, which is just beyond that, and then that night they cross it, and then they're able to kind of protect themselves a little bit better. You might remember that we have Saul, who takes his life, and his armor bearer, as he's been injured in battle. We get that generally. One of the very few cases where you have someone who is healthy take his life is Ahithophel here. He says, I'm smart enough to know that David just won, because Absalom didn't make the one play that would have checkmated him. And so David's going to win now. He's going to come back. I can't think of what he's going to do to me. So it says he went home and finished his taxes and put his house in order, and then he takes his life. Of course, we have Judas doing this in the New Testament, who's also a traitor. And so you get little hints, not because it's necessarily a prediction, but because in every event, the same kind of stuff goes on. There are always people who are involved in some of these kinds of things. So David gets to Mahanaim, and Amasa, who later is going to be his general when David gets angry with Joab, Amasa is pursuing him. So chapter 18 then, David actually divides himself up into 3 different camps, and the soldiers go out. What's the one thing that David said? Don't kill Absalom. Don't kill Absalom. Joab is going to say, I'm a little smarter than the king on this one. And so he's going to make sure he gets put to death. One of the parts of this is it says that Absalom had so much hair, and the commentaries say it's 2 to 3 pounds of hair with the number of shekels that he would have, so that he cuts the hair off. The other one is kind of a prelude to, it doesn't quite say it in the text, but he got his hair caught in a tree, which
That's
is,
what mine says.
what? Oh, it actually says the hair? Okay.
He's dangling from the tree.
Yeah, it says he got caught there, but whether, in the text, whether it actually is that specific. So anyway, David asks for mercy for Absalom, and then you have the battle of the forest of Ephraim. That'd be on the west side, so some of his soldiers went back and they attacked on the other side. So David is on the east side of the Jordan, they would have been on the west side of the Jordan. At least I've never seen anything about Ephraim on the east side. And so then Joab finally kills him. And he says that, we got to be done with him. Now, there is a monument down in the Kidron Valley that's called the Monument to Absalom. You guys were in Jerusalem? Do you remember that one?
No,
there are 3 of them down in the Kidron Valley. This one, it's got a kind of a cone that goes up, and then a kind of a little ball on the top of it. That's called the Monument to Absalom. Very close to the Church of All Nations down there. And there are a couple other monuments there. Can't be anywhere near the right time period. But it's what got hung on it later, when people didn't know exactly when this or that was built. But anyway, Absalom says he puts up this in the King's Valley, which is actually Rephaim on the other side of the city of Jerusalem. But this one gets called the Absalom Monument. And so then a Cushite. Where's Cush? Ethiopia. Ethiopia. You ask Abdisa about Cush. One of my confirmants, and he'll smile. Just all he has to do is. Then Ahimaaz finally finds out, or tells David what goes on. So now we get chapter 19, the end of this Absalom thing. So we've got Amnon gone. Now we've got Absalom gone. There's going to be some others along the way. But the troops steal back into the city ashamed of what they did. And Joab goes to David and he says, you get out there and you thank those guys, or you're not going to have anybody following you. And so he goes back out, and he then acknowledges with thanks, even though he's mourning for his son, oh Absalom, Absalom, my son. I don't know if you remember, Dale, but Mr. Bussey had us sing the Lament of David for Absalom when we were at St. Stephen. It was one of the pieces that we learned. I always thought that was a really neat song. Were to God I had died instead of you. I wish I'd have died instead of you. And so then the tribes have to decide who's gonna take David back. Bad PR here. Because all the northern tribes come and they say, we're gonna bring David back. David says, no, my tribe of Judah made him king. They're gonna crawl. They're gonna bring me back. And so all the other tribes are offended. We came to bring him back and celebrate him coming back, and now he wants to wait for the other guys. He thinks they're important and we're not. Really bad mistake that he made. And so, for his own desire to get them to come back. Well, because Joab killed Absalom, David fired him. Remember, it's his nephew, and he fired him. He'll later come back. But he fired him and put Amasa, the general of Absalom, in his place. So the opposing general, he makes his general. I don't know whether I don't know what to do with that. It's just there. And so then we get the story toward the very end. Abishai and Joab are rejected as being in charge. Mephibosheth says, hey, they all just left the palace. I couldn't get there. He says, well, I don't know which one's right and wrong, so you can have half the property, Ziba gets the other half. If Ziba was lying, he gets half. If he was telling the truth, he gets half. And you get half. I don't know how to figure that one out, he says. And then Barzillai, the Gileadite from up the northern part up here, Barzillai had helped him a lot. And David said, why don't you come with me? And I'll put you up here. Barzillai says, I like where I live. You can take my son with you. And so there's a kind of a peace treaty, because Barzillai would have helped him up at Mahanaim and would have been the one who kind of watches over him. We don't know how long this takes, whether it's 2 days or 3 weeks or 6 months or whatever it is. But anyway, now we begin, and somebody asked me in the break about this as well, we begin to have this Israel versus Judah stuff. Judah was always kind of by itself, and Israel was kind of by itself. They aren't described that way most of the time. It's Israel, the tribes of Israel, the tribes connected with Jacob. And then Jerusalem is in there. But David would have had them all together. Solomon would have had them all together. They're going to split and stay split after Solomon dies. So we will see that at the end of next week's lesson is where they will split. The first chapter of the week after that. So we've got four times yet to go, right?
Yep. Yep.
2 in Kings and 2 in second, 2 in First and 2 in Second Kings. It'll be the last half of First Kings that we'll talk about that. Now, what? You're gonna miss a couple.
They're gonna miss a couple, and I said I'm not taking notes.
You'll have to go online and get a cup of coffee or something. Enjoy it. Okay, so random stuff at the end now. The reason that the line gets drawn at the end of 2 Samuel is because of the choice of the temple area. We'll have 2 more chapters about David in 1 Kings 1 and 2. And so this is kind of random stories that get pulled together. So first of all, in 2 Samuel 20, Sheba ben Bichri of Benjamin revolts. Why would Benjamin revolt? The tribe of Benjamin. It's the tribe of Saul. They've never given up on saying David shouldn't have been king. Okay, so there's Benjaminites all over the place. In fact, it's interesting that Saul, later known as Paul, was also a Benjaminite. He traces himself down to that. But Sheba ben Bichri revolts and says to the northern tribes, come on, join with me. Now, when Amnon raped Tamar, he got off the hook. And it really affected the entire country from then on. When David killed Uriah, he really got off the hook, but it affected lots of things. But this Sheba ben Bichri, he goes and he flees up in the north to Beth Maacah. And on the way, David says to Amasa, go pursue him. And Amasa delays. He doesn't go right away. So Joab says, oh, that wimp of a general. Let him go. So he goes and kills him. Okay, Joab just plain do it. And so there are several people who die because of Joab, which will not help Joab next week.
He has one more week to live, huh?
He has one more week to live, yes. Well, he has about 5 chapters yet to live, 6 chapters yet to live. So anyway, a wise woman, the 3 wise women here, Abigail in 1 Samuel, Nabal's wife, and the woman from Tekoa, and now the woman from Abel Beth Maacah. So 3 wise women who all have the sense to know what's really going to happen. And so she says, his head will come over the wall by morning. We are not going to let our whole town get destroyed because of this one guy. Do you remember at not Ziklag, where was it? In the south, where David helps this one town, and they say, yeah, we're going to turn him in. And so then he flees. I can't remember the name of that one right now, but it was at the end before, soon on when David was fleeing from everybody. And so they put him to death then, throw his head over the wall and say, we're not going to lose our whole city because of one guy. We don't want to join in the rebellion. So then we have a list of all of the major leaders. Benaiah later is going to become the general, but you have the officers, the officials who are there. And it's a little bit more detailed than what you would have with Saul. Chapter 21, we get into the fact there was 3 years of famine. And David finds out because Saul had killed some Gibeonites. The Gibeonites are the sun stood still crowd, where they had lied to Joshua about the fact they had come from a long way away. And then they made a peace treaty with them. And then they say, well, you're going to become the hewers of wood and the drawers of water. And Gibeon maybe was the place where the tabernacle was even for a while. Well, Saul apparently killed some of them. And so 7 of his grandkids, 2 by his older daughter Merab and 5 by his concubine Rizpah, Rizpah loses 2 and Merab loses 5. He puts 7 to death. Now 7 may be the number of completeness. It may be that there were 7 people in Gibeon who got killed. There's no way to know that anymore. But anyway, Rizpah stays by where her kids have been killed, even through all the stench, because she wants her children's bodies to be able to go down into the ground and be buried all together. So finally David hears about that and he says, go bury them in Saul's tomb. And so that's done then. And then the Philistines get defeated once more. Chapter 22 is a song. It's the equivalent of Psalm 18 pretty much, and talks about how God is the one who has given the great victories. You are my light, and my rock and my strength. And then in chapter 23 we have the last words of David, even though there's going to be some stuff about how he gets succeeded. And once again, the Lord is called the rock and has made an everlasting covenant with him. And then a variety of the listing of the 37 mighty men and various battle narratives, including this one where he says, boy, I sure would enjoy a drink out of the fountain, or out of the water in Bethlehem. So they go get it and then he pours it on the ground. He says, you guys could have gotten killed for that. I can't drink that water now. But a variety of little, it's almost like somebody who was writing this down said, we got a few extra stories, let's throw them in somewhere. We don't want to lose them all. It's really how it reads. And then chapter 24, the last chapter here, David does a census. Joab is back in charge here, and he says, I don't think you ought to do that. Because you count either to get tax money, or you do a count to find out how many people you have who can go to war. And the idea is, if God is on our side, we don't need to count how many people can go to war. So he does this thing. It takes about 9 months and a little bit. And as they get to Jerusalem, David confesses his sin, that he has gone against God with this. And the plague stops at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. Jebus is one of the old names of Jerusalem. And where that happens, that is where he builds, or has the site for the temple. Okay, Solomon will build it, but that's the place where God was merciful. Many years ago, I was teaching a weekend kind of class for students who were teaching down in Cedar Rapids, who were finishing their degree, a few courses in religion at Concordia to get their teaching, their church teaching certificate. And it was a Friday morning, and I was very tired. I was looking for a place to pull off. Anybody ever been down, I think it's on 55 or 52 down to Rochester, which is it? 52. Anybody know where Zumbrota is?
Yes.
Well, guess what? When you get to Zumbrota, the road curves just a little bit going into town.
Yep.
Just a little bit. I fell asleep. I don't know, you ever hear about this, you're not supposed to fall asleep when you drive?
That's not a good thing.
I heard that somewhere. And I was trying hard to find a place, there was just no real place. So I wake up bouncing in the median. Didn't hit anything, but here I am bouncing along in the median. That does wake you up. Luckily, there was no culvert or anything, and I can remember a guy up on the highway just shaking his head, you know, what in the world's the matter with you? Well, I pulled back on the road, there was just a little bit of grass and hay or whatever from under the car that I saw the next day. But if I lived in ancient times, I would have bought some land right there and built a little shrine.
Yeah.
Okay, a shrine of thanks to God that you saved my life there. There are a few places in this country where I should build one. But anyway, normally you have books come to an end when people die. So you've got the end of Deuteronomy is Moses, the end of Genesis is Jacob, you know, the end of Joshua is Joshua's death. But here with David, we're going to go a couple more chapters, and because the temple was so important, that's the thing here. But so where God turned away his wrath, and remember the word 1,000 might be just a unit or a category, so it doesn't necessarily mean 70,000 by our mathematics, but the equivalent of 70 contingents of soldiers or whatever. So it's still a goodly number of people. But anyway, he says, I have to buy it. You can't give it to me, just like Abraham had to buy the cave of Machpelah. Now that's where the Dome of the Rock is. That's the most fought over piece of real estate in the Western world anyway. And now that's where the Golden Dome is, the Dome of the Rock, and I pray that we never see any Jewish people knock that building down, because the response would be so horrendous. I never want to see that happen. But there is lumber in Jerusalem to rebuild the temple by Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jews. They are ready. Every time they say we're just going to go up and look around up there, there are usually some people who get hurt and some people who get killed. And we'll talk about that more as we go on to the story of Solomon. But anyway, that's where we are now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
I always hate finishing this story because I like telling it so much. Won't be able to do it again now, so it goes.